David Teel covers college athletics, cover football, ACC for the Virginia Pilot, and has been a long time legendary columnist. He joins us on 365 Sports. Hey, David, it's been a while. Thanks for your time. How you been, sir?
Good afternoon. I'm well. Hope you guys are the same.
What did you learn from the ACC meetings that perhaps was either new, intriguing, or something that we maybe don't know about?
I don't know that we learned a whole lot new, guys. I think there were a couple of takeaways. Number one, just the vibe of the 3 days at Amelia Island was dramatically different from the past 2 years when there was so much drama and so much infighting and tension. And now, since the March settlement of the Florida State, Clemson, and ACC dueling lawsuits, it's a lot more settled. I mean, nobody's holding hands and singing Kumbaya, but it was much more collegial and I think much more productive because of that. I mean, the issues were what you might expect. The impending expected House settlement, future college football playoff structure, NCAA governance, football scheduling, the Notre Dame rotation, and the new series with Clemson. So myriad issues, but I think the overall overarching takeaway was just the atmosphere.
David, I know that like a lot of it was Bill Belichick related for better or for worse for Coach Belichick. But when it came down to the issues of the automatic qualifiers and all that, do you see maybe a stronger, more resolute Jim Phillips when it comes to those things, at least publicly? Because he's one of the quiet commissioners when it comes to these things. He's not Tony Petitti, like in the background, silent over this gigantic empire, but he's not as maybe bold as Greg Sankey or Brett Yormark is when he speaks.
Agreed. Sankey and Yormark are in a different league there, and that's just their personalities. And Jim doesn't need to be anything that he's not. He's true to himself, and I think that makes him more effective. I mean, we saw it last season. He lobbied relentlessly, publicly, for SMU to get into the playoff. And whether that had any effect on the selection committee, we'll really never know. But lo and behold, the Mustangs not only made the field, but they were chosen over Alabama. And I think there were many people who thought, an ACC runner-up getting in over an SEC power such as Alabama will never happen, but it did. And in this case, he has been, in his word, steadfast from the start about opposing multiple automatic qualifiers for any conference, let alone 4 each for the Big Ten and the SEC, while relegating the ACC and Big 12 to 2 apiece. And I think their hope is to marshal enough public opinion and pressure to force Tony Petitti and Greg Sankey to back down. Whether they're successful or not remains to be seen.
That's all the power they have now, right, David? I mean, the actual decisions are in the hands now of the SEC and the Big Ten. So we were just talking to Ross Dellinger a little while ago. I was like, why are they even entertaining the ACC and the Big 12? It's what? Politics and public pressure. I mean, that's the two things that can actually possibly make a difference, but there's little else.
I think you're right. And let me throw one more possible wrinkle into this. Let's just say the SEC and the Big Ten get their way. We have seen states' attorney generals challenge the NCAA in court multiple times over the last year and a half. Let's just say here in my home state of Virginia, where UVA and Virginia Tech reside in the ACC, it would not surprise me at all if the attorney general here challenged a college football playoff model that was so weighted toward 2 particular conferences on an antitrust basis.
David, do you think Phillips and Yormark regret giving in to the Big Ten and SEC? They may not have had a choice, but could they have been a little more stubborn? It just seems like, go down fighting, whatever. Okay, you're still going to get your butt kicked. But do you feel like they regret that a year ago?
At Game Time, we revel in life's impromptu moments, like cheering on your hometown team at a Friday night baseball game or dancing the night away at an intimate concert. So we built a ticket marketplace that makes it faster and easier to get into your favorite events at a moment's notice. Discover incredible live experiences, real-time price drops, see your seat view, instant checkout, mobile tickets, and best of all, Game Time ticket coverage. Score the best deals on great seats with Game Time.
I think they probably regret the outcome, but I don't know that they regret their efforts. I think they did all that they could. And, the numbers, the past performances and such were heavily weighted toward those two conferences. And as several ACC athletic directors have expressed to me, and this is an exact phrase, the Big Ten and the SEC were weaponizing this. In other words, either you go along with this, or we're headed elsewhere on our own. Now, could the ACC and the Big 12 have called that bluff? Perhaps, but they elected not to.
Do you think that they could maybe call it now, or is it further down the line? Like, is that the last card they would have to play if it came down to it, is just call their bluff and dare them to?
Well, yeah, I don't know that that's even a card they could play. I think the more likely play here is public opinion, and then perhaps a legal challenge. It's going to be fascinating to watch. You mentioned you had Ross on earlier today, and I was struck by the lead to his most recent story on the subject, where a congressman from Pennsylvania expressed dismay over the prospect of this CFP model. And last I checked, Penn State is in the Big Ten. And yet here was a representative from that Commonwealth obviously opposed to this. So it'll be interesting to see, the college football industry has long pined for congressional intervention on NIL and transfers and such. May come first with the CFP.
David, when Bill Belichick arrived, was there like a bunch of clowns and elephants, like the whole circus? Was that trailing him as he entered the doors to the ACC meetings? Because, man, what a last couple of weeks, huh?
It was a little more subtle than that because number one, he was late and strolled into the general session Monday afternoon, I'd say a good 10 to 15 minutes after everyone else had entered the room. He was pulling a North Carolina roller bag, marked up just as the Tar Heels would want. And he did not have Miss Hudson in tow. So I think that contributed to the lack of elephants and circus clowns.
Have you ever seen anything like that? That you've covered this sport for a long, long time. I mean, this has been kind of as unique, especially for someone who is such a control freak.
Very TMZ.
Yes.
I have wondered, guys, whether TMZ would be at spring meetings.
Yes.
And
I wonder if they would credential them. I would think they would, because
guys, it's an uncredentialed event.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
You may have just tipped him off.
Yeah, I may talk about Mark and Phillips regretting some things. I may regret that, but no, it's obviously a very unique story, and it's been so peculiar to watch. And really, it's a mess of North Carolina and Bill Belichick's doing. Bill Belichick could have cut this off quite easily by being more upfront about talking about, here's a concept, North Carolina football, rather than his book. And oh, by the way, how about making some of his players available to the media during the spring? You leave us with very little opportunity to talk about anything else. And then Jordan interrupts the interview, and that goes viral. And yet still, there was this reluctance to talk about the football team.
Yeah.
And it seems in North Carolina didn't push him on it. But now apparently they have, and he has responded. And, he talked to ESPN and some local North Carolina media down in Amelia Island. And I know he's going on GMA tomorrow with Michael Strahan. So maybe things are moving in a more conventional direction.
Well, I still don't understand why they just didn't answer the question. We met on a plane, because that's the story we all knew. Like, it wasn't, it was pretty innocuous and would not have even made the final interview. Had they just, we met on a plane, like that's it, like that was the story we all knew.
Total softball.
Yeah. Yeah.
Total softball, and they whiffed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wiffle ball almost.
Yeah.
David, I got a question for you. You mentioned that the I hate that term alliance, because we understand that turned out to be a nightmare with what Warren did at the Big Ten. But the Big Ten and the SEC have their little powwows. They get together, flex their muscles, tell everybody how bigger, better, faster, stronger they are, and they are. Why would the ACC and Big 12 not have some sort of relationship, knowing that they're swimming uphill? Because it doesn't appear that they do, for whatever reason.
Well, they don't have any scheduling alliance, certainly. And actually, I don't know that it would interest the ACC, because the ACC has more big football brands than the Big 12. Now, do Phillips and Yormark work together on certain things? I would absolutely expect that is indeed the case, but it's more, it's less formal than the doomed and failed alliance of the past.
David, Clemson appears to be pointed in the direction that they used to be with the returning quarterback. He experimented lightly with the transfer portal. Just a couple puffs. He's not getting up in the morning and doing it every day, but he experimented with the transfer portal and got some good players out of it. Would a pretty big deal for the ACC, because they appear to be the brand that is best ready to compete in the playoff, that they not only get in there like they did last year, but maybe do something, and then maybe have Miami do something as well?
I think those are the two teams that you would think. Miami adding Carson Beck at quarterback, if he can return to 2023 form and that shoulder is healed. You mentioned Klubnik. He was so good against Texas in the CFP and equally impressive against SMU in the ACC championship game. Where Clemson has to get better is on the defensive side. And that's where Tom Allen comes in. That may have been as big a quote unquote portal acquisition for Dabo during the offseason as any, is squaring away Tom Allen from James Franklin at Penn State as defensive coordinator.
David, the Notre Dame series does not count as a conference game.
So says Jim Phillips.
Okay, so
I'm not sure Pete Bavacqua is of the same mind.
Well, and Pete Bavacqua might have more power than the ACC commissioner in all this at the end, right?
As I was texting with someone, Notre Dame is accustomed to getting its way all the time. And I'm presuming that Pete Bavacqua thinks that will be the case again. But I asked Jim Phillips directly yesterday, guys, do the new Notre Dame games against Clemson, 7 of the 12 are newly scheduled. 5 were already part of the rotation. Do these 7 new games count for Notre Dame's contract at 5 a year versus ACC opponents? And he said no. Whether they can hold Notre Dame to that remains to be seen. And I know there's a lot of ACC athletic directors on the edge of their seat waiting for resolution because they need to know if they're going to lose any scheduled games against Notre Dame, because that's going to cost them money with this new viewership initiative that the ACC has with distributing television money. You want to have the best ratings. You want to have the best games. And there's no better way to do that than to play the Fighting Irish.
And how did they take that when Pete Vivacqua said, look, we want to play Clemson, Miami, and Florida State more in this rotation? Was that kind of a punch in the gut to schools? And like Boston College is kind of a rival that like they're maybe a little protected in that a little bit, maybe Pitt, I guess. But if you're Wake Forest, if you're Georgia Tech or any of the North Carolina schools like NC State, they don't like Notre Dame kind of said like, we enjoyed our trip, but like, we don't have to go back, anytime soon.
Well, I think how Notre Dame views NC State is apparent from this year's game against the Wolfpack, which is on what? Peacock. It's the one game that NBC and Notre Dame elected to move to streaming.
Yeah, elected. That in the end, it's good. I just, I don't know. I think the ACC's got something brewing. With Clemson getting a high level, FSU's been to hell and back, although they haven't been back yet, but that would help. Miami's strong. Where do you see the top part, and how many teams, in your opinion, David, are the top tier of the ACC in a legitimate? They could play in the college football playoff and maybe get pretty deep into it.
I think you're looking at Clemson, Miami, Louisville, SMU. I think those would be my top four. Not sold yet on Florida State going from 2-10 to CFP. I know Kurt Cignetti worked similar magic at Indiana last season, but it just seems like a long shot. Now, is Florida State going to be markedly better? Absolutely. And I certainly expect them to be in postseason and perhaps comfortably so. But if you ask me for a top four, those would be at Miller Moss, coming to Louisville, and Coach Brom is excellent with quarterbacks. He's proven that time and time again. Kevin Jennings back at SMU. Rhett Lashley really has that program humming, especially on the offensive side. And then, Miami needs to be better defensively. And what did they do? They went out and hired Minnesota's defensive coordinator, Corey Heatherman. The Golden Gophers were a top 10 defense last season. I saw them in person absolutely smother Virginia Tech in the Duke's Mayo Bowl. Now, granted, it was a very compromised Virginia Tech roster because of opt-outs and injuries, but still, Minnesota throughout the season was quite good defensively. And I think Heatherman's arrival should really help the Hurricanes this season.
Who do you think is in a little bit of trouble in the league? Is Tony Elliott maybe in a little bit of trouble if this quarterback thing doesn't work out and he can't get the who's going? Virginia Tech's in a weird spot. Like, who do you see as it's tight right now?
Well, that's all the chatter here in my state, guys, is that you have two fourth-year coaches in Brent Pry and Tony Elliott. And they're coming off disappointing seasons and really disappointing starts to their tenures overall. And 4 years, it's time to produce. So we will see. It would not stun anyone if there was regime change in both places if they fail to make the postseason in 2025.
David, good stuff, man. I'm glad we reached out to you. Appreciate you having time for us today. We'll see you soon. Thank you.
Gentlemen, enjoyed it. Thank you.
David Teel, the Virginia Pilot, and the Daily News and more with us on 365 Sports.